True Crime Brewery contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Medical information is opinion based on facts of a crime and should not be interpreted as medical advice or treatment. Listener discretion is advised.
The poem insinuated that he thought I was beautiful.
Do you have any idea why the defendant would have these feelings toward you?
I think I'm a pretty nice person. I'm a very caring person.
Were you and the defendant romantically involved?
No.
It's about how you felt when we looked at the stars in Tahoe, when we woke up Friday morning in Denver, when we walked out of the restaurant on Thursday, when you took my hand and nestled your head on my shoulder.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Did that happen?
Did what happen?
Did you wake up together in Denver in Tahoe?
No.
Did you ever tell Rusty about the poem or the defendant's feelings towards you?
No.
Why not?
I really thought that I could handle it. I viewed it very much as a silly boy email. He was being silly and stupid, and in fact, I spoke with him about that email at work in person and told him to stop. He managed to get me to care about him, and that's actually the point. He was very good at that, very good at manipulating everyone around him to feel bad for him.
Did he stalk you from inside your own room?
Stalking can take on many different meanings.
So that's a yes.
He was there to spend time with me, evidently.
In your room?
Yeah, he did not share a room with me. Was he in my room? Might have been for a little while, but didn't share a room with me.
The stalker that you've now testified about, you picked him up at the airport.
Yep.
You flew home with him.
That's correct.
You changed seats to sit next to him.
That's how we always traveled.
Hemi Newman says, please never forget how much I love you. And how did you respond?
I know, but so do other people. I betrayed them all. I'm not sure how to deal with that for now, but my burden, not yours.
What happened in Greenville, man?
We were holding each other's hands, and that's it. It may sound worse than it is, but to me, that was a betrayal. Have you seen what's happened to my life? Have you noticed?
Seen what's happened to Rusty?
Have you
seen what's happened to Rusty?
Have you noticed what's happened to my life since Hemi was murdered? Since Hemi murdered my husband?
At that point, did they tell you or indicate to you Rusty was in fact dead?
Yep.
Okay, is that the first time you found out he was dead?
Yep.
And you found out he was shot?
Yep.
How many times did you call Rusty?
Call Rusty?
Rusty.
0 times.
Why didn't you call Rusty?
Because they just told me something had happened to Rusty. What are the chances that he's going to be answering his cell phone?
Welcome to True Crime Brewery. I'm Jill.
And I'm Dick. Good evening.
So people do crazy things for love. Sometimes people kill for love. Sometimes a person dies in the name of love, and their loved ones are left to go on somehow without them, to ponder the whys and the what-ifs. When Rusty Sneiderman was shot dead after dropping his 3-year-old son at daycare on November 18, 2010, police speculated that it was a professional hit. He was executed with multiple gunshot wounds by an unknown assailant who fled the scene in a rented minivan. But this was no professional hit. This was a calculated but passion-fueled act, a strategy to allow Rusty's wife Andrea the freedom to spend the rest of her life with another man and inherit millions of dollars. At the Quiet End today, we're going to tell you about a crime of passion and insanity, a family's loss, and a woman who may have gotten away with cold-blooded murder. In this episode of True Crime Brewery, Crazy Love. So, Dick, did you bring a beer for us?
I sure did.
All right, good. I was expecting you to say yep.
After that intro?
Yes.
Now I'm going to save my comments for later.
Okay.
She didn't come across real well, did she?
No, not a likable woman, but
No.
we'll definitely get into that.
We certainly will.
Let's get the alcohol out first.
Okay.
First things first.
First things first, the important stuff. So this is a beer called the Digits Blood Orange IPA, brewed by Burnt Hickory Brewing in Kennesaw, Georgia. So the Digits is an American IPA. These beers are pale gold to reddish amber in color. They usually have a big aroma of citrus and or herbal hops. They tend to be medium-bodied. And there's usually a fair amount of balance between the hops and the malt. So it's not like a hop bomb and it's not an overly malty beer. So this particular one, the Digits, is a hazy rusty orange color. Got this big, huge, amazing white head that leaves a little bit of lacing. The aroma is all citrus peel and herbal hops. And the taste is more citrus, mostly grapefruit, some orange skin, pith of the orange, that white stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of oily.
I never thought of it that way, but okay.
So it's a pretty big citrusy beer. And if you like citrus in your IPAs, this is the one for you.
I do.
All right.
I don't always drink IPAs, but when I do, they're citrus.
They tend to be.
Yes.
I know you like IPAs pretty much.
I do.
I know they've been supplanted by your sours, but
yeah. Before I discovered sours, I was an IPA girl.
You were.
But sours have really stole my heart.
Well, I think you'd like this one.
I bet I would.
All right.
All right, let's open it.
You got it.
Okie dokie. Okay, Dickie, let's head on down to the quiet end.
I'm with you. I got the beer. I got the glasses. We'll do a good little discussion here. It is quiet out here.
It's quiet.
I think those guys that you've been seeing down here, gold chain guy and toupee guy, I think you scared them off.
Well, I think they needed to go back home and kind of rethink their lives before they return.
Well, that's a little harsh, don't you think?
I kid.
Okay.
Okay.
But they're not here.
No.
So we hope you're not offended.
They're off on some kind of self-improvement project, I'm sure.
Okay, they must be. So anyway, just before 9 o'clock in the morning on that Thursday in 2010, Rusty Sneiderman's silver Infiniti pulled into the parking lot outside of his 3-year-old son Ian's daycare. That was Dunwoody Prep Preschool. Now, Rusty is a youthful 36-year-old former chief financial officer. Well, hell, he's only 36. He should be youthful.
Okay, well, I think some 36-year-olds are more youthful than others.
That could be true.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at it from my vantage point.
Exactly.
Where 36-year-olds all look youthful. Now, Rusty's wife had recently gone back to work full-time. Rusty was staying home with her 2 children as he started work on his own company. Rusty's wife, Andrea, took their 5-year-old daughter, Sophia, to kindergarten on her way to work each morning. So Rusty took Ian into the school, came back to his car. He hadn't noticed or seen the silver minivan which had been following him that morning. Rusty was casually dressed. He had a meeting with a potential business partner at 11:30, so he planned to go home and change beforehand.
Yeah, so Rusty, he probably didn't think much of the bearded figure in a hoodie who got out of the minivan and approached him. If they did speak, it wasn't overheard by any witnesses. Now, with no signs of a confrontation or an argument, the figure pointed a large chrome-plated handgun at Rusty and pulled the trigger 4 times. Now, about 50 yards across the parking lot, a chiropractor and his wife heard these shots from where they stood outside of the post office. They saw the silver minivan and the man as he walked casually toward it, and he did have a silver-colored gun in his hand.
So there's a luxury car nearby, Rusty's, and a man lay dying near the driver's side door. The van engine started, and the van jerked away, peeling out of the parking lot. Once on the street, the van made a U-turn and disappeared into rush-hour traffic. So it's like a robbery getaway, huh?
Yeah, and it seemed to the chiropractor like the person who was driving the van wasn't used to driving the vehicle. Was a little awkward with getting it going.
Okay.
So it was 9:15 when Andrea Schneiderman received a call from Donna Formato, the assistant director of the Dunwoody Preschool. Now, Andrea was at her desk where she worked at GE. Donna told Andrea that something had happened at Ian's school, that Ian was okay, but that she needed to come to the school right away. Now, she didn't mention Rusty or gunshots. She didn't want to alarm Andrea, so she would get into a car accident on her way to school, so she was vague. But she did tell her she needed to come, and she was concerned about Andrea, so she tried to remain calm on the phone as well.
But Andrea wasn't calm.
No, not at all.
She's screaming into the phone, demanding to know more, although she never did ask if it was Rusty.
She didn't ask, which is always a strange thing in these cases when someone doesn't ask what happened.
Exactly.
Well, Donna refused to say any more on the phone anyway, so Andrea ran out of her office and started driving towards the school. And on her way, she made several calls on her cell phone. So who did she call?
Well, she called her parents. She called her brother. She left messages that she was on her way to the preschool. She then called Donald Sneiderman, who was Rusty's father. He lived in Cleveland. And she called her boss, Hemi Newman, on his cell phone.
Yeah, so Hemi, he's married, he's a father of 3 with a prestigious career at GE. He appeared to be well-adjusted and successful in life, but his understated personality hid really a lifetime of dysfunction. Hemi's sister Monique would describe their childhoods as isolated, frightening, and painful. Hemi's father was Mark Newman, and he was among 130 family members who were taken to Auschwitz, Nazi death camp. Mark was taken with his brother, his grandparents, his parents, 6 uncles and several cousins, and some other relatives, and only 12 of them survived, including Mark and his brother. So after the war, Mark had moved to Mexico. He was 36, and he married a beautiful 17-year-old woman, and they had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. So Hemi was the middle child. Now the concentration camp never stopped haunting their father, according to Monique. He was a detached father and an isolated husband.
Yeah, I guess the marriage had a lot of arguing going on.
Very strained, yeah.
So Hemi was born in Mexico, but he grew up in Puerto Rico. And it was in Puerto Rico that Mark Newman, Dad, owned several jewelry shops for tourists. But he went bankrupt.
Yeah, more than once. Now Hemi's mother, Rebecca, she was a socialite, and she spent long periods of her time traveling even after the kids were born. So with their mother absent and their father consumed with his personal demons and his business failures, Hemi and his siblings really had to fend for themselves. But even that was preferable to when their father was there, which they describe as just constant hell. You never knew what was going to happen.
Never did. The slightest thing could set off their father, and he'd erupt with screaming and violence. If Rebecca was home, the parents would argue over dinner. Hemi's father would slap the children. He once shoved a spoon into Monique's nose. Monique recalled deep purple bruises from her father's abuse. But according to Monique, Hemi bore the brunt of their father's rage.
So Mark would slap and beat Hemi with a belt for no apparent reason, and if his mother was there, she would beg him to stop, but this just seemed to fuel him on and make him even more angry and make the beating worse. For the most part, Hemi's mother wasn't there anyway. She went out with friends, she gambled at the casino, she played on a bridge club. In the afternoons when the kids came home from school, Rebecca would usually be sleeping off the night before.
'Cause she's up all night, socializing, drinking, I'm sure.
I'm sure, yes. And if the kids made any noise and woke her up, their father would become enraged at them for that.
Yeah, no-win situation for these kids.
No. Now, the one thing was that the mother did bring some money into the house from her inheritance, so they did have a maid who cleaned up and prepared some meals, but other than that, the children basically raised themselves. Now, despite all that, Hemi did well in school. When he was 13, he was sent to boarding school in Israel, which he described as kind of a shock to him. And then after boarding school, he came to the U.S. to study at Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I guess in the book we read, he kind of just got dropped off a plane in Israel. He knew no Hebrew.
Right.
When he arrived there. and he's by himself at age 13.
Yeah, that had to be really tough.
Holy cow.
Now, at Georgia Tech, he was doing really well, but then he got into an extended depression in his sophomore year. And after that, it seemed like his life became a series of ups and downs with his depression and mania. He did manage to graduate from Georgia Tech, and after that, he returned to Israel to work.
Right. And back in Israel, Hemi met and married his wife, Ariella, who he called Riella.
Mm-hmm.
He had a good job. They had twins. Then, during a trip to Florida in 1998, Hemi impulsively bought a house in Boca Raton, quit his job in Israel, moved the family to Florida. So he's unemployed when they arrived. For a while they lived off the proceeds from the sale of their home in Israel. His energy seemed to know no bounds during this time, though. He spoke of plans to become a commercial pilot. But he didn't find a job. They ran out of money and moved back to Israel.
Yeah, so Hemi, he's working in Israel for 3 years, and then the family returns to the U.S. for his job at GE. He had a high-paying job there, but things really didn't improve at home. There was a lot of tension. Hemi seemed manic, and he would spend every dime he earned buying jewelry and doing extensive home improvements. Now, between March and August of 2008, Hemi had gone through $71,000. He then cashed out his $100,000 pension with a plan to pay off $77,000 in credit card debt that he'd accumulated. But by the end of that year, the credit card balance had only been brought down to $71,000, so he'd ended up spending most of the money again.
On something else.
Other things, yes.
It just boggles my mind. You know how crazy I get if I have $1,000 balance on a credit card.
I know.
And he's got $80,000.
Well,
and it's just, holy cow.
I mean, it seems like he was a manic depressive, and that's something that they often do during a manic phase.
In the manic phase, life looms large.
Exactly. The grandiosity. Then by 2010, this is when Hemi and Ralia started having some serious marital problems. He felt lonely, and he really began slipping at work. He seemed to be entering into the depressive state now. So according to Hemi, the only thing he had going for him in 2010 was his children and a new woman who had entered his life. Now this new woman we've heard of. Her name is Andrea Sneiderman.
She is.
She works for him.
He was her boss. Now this is Andrea Sneiderman's first job that she'd had after raising the kids. Or
outside of the home.
Right.
Yeah, right. So Andrea was born Andrea Greenberg in Sylvania, Ohio. She was good at math and science, and she ended up going to the University of Indiana, and that's in Bloomington, where she majored in computer information systems. In 1994, Andrea visited the campus's Hillel chapter. The Jewish home away from home is how it was phrased, how it was described. There was a large screen TV, a pool table, a gym. There were various activities, including the religious services. At a weekend retreat, Andrea met Rusty Sneiderman, and when the retreat was over, Rusty called Andrea and they began dating.
So Rusty, the guy she met, was the son of an accountant from a close-knit Jewish family, much like Andrea's. Rusty was an overachiever who was editor of the school newspaper, and he played on the school golf team. All right for him.
Yeah, Andrea and Rusty really made a good-looking and ambitious couple. Rusty graduated in 1996 and returned to Cleveland to work as an accountant, while Andrea came to be with him the summer after her junior year, staying in her own apartment and spending time with Rusty and even his family.
Rusty's mom and dad, Donald and Marilyn, really liked Andrea. The two seemed to be in love. For the next 2 years, they had a long-distance relationship. They drove back and forth to spend time together, called each other nightly, and even Skyped, which was a relatively new thing at the time.
Yeah, so they got a small apartment in Chicago after Andrea graduated, and they both got jobs at Deloitte Consulting and lived together as they planned their future. Now at this point, the stock market was doing really well, so Rusty invested until he had enough money to buy Andrea the kind of engagement ring she really wanted. So when he proposed in 2000, they vacationed at a California resort to kind of celebrate. Then Rusty applied to business schools, and he was accepted at Harvard. So they married that December and settled into a small Boston apartment, and then Rusty went for his MBA.
Pretty good. Harvard business.
It's impressive, isn't it?
It is. So Andrea worked for a startup company until Rusty helped her find a position as a liaison between software technicians and Harvard professors. When Rusty graduated, he was offered a position with Seibel Systems in Atlanta. They moved to a nice neighborhood north of Atlanta. Now, Andrea was able to work from home for the Harvard Business School. She traveled to Boston once a month until she became an independent contractor for the publishing unit and billed hourly for her services.
So she's a pretty high achiever also. They're both smart people.
Both smart people.
Successful people in business.
And right now they're dinks. Remember that? Double income, no kids?
Well, I don't remember that.
You don't remember that?
No.
But anyway,
that's true.
That didn't last for very long. In 2005, their daughter Sophia was born. And they moved to a more exclusive Dunwoody neighborhood.
Right, so Rusty moved to another company. And their incomes and savings helped them to get a $900,000 house on a cul-de-sac. Then they became active in the Jewish community there. When Ian was born in 2007, Ian stayed home with Andrea while she worked from home. The family bought a second home on Lake Oconee, an hour and a half away, where they spent their weekends boating and hanging out with their family and their friends. So they've got a pretty good life going here. Most people would admire this life.
But there's always a but.
Of course.
So by late 2007, Rusty got laid off, and Andrea got less work from Harvard. Property values were dropping. The couple had 2 mortgages, no full-time work, but they had a considerable amount saved. So Rusty took another position as CFO for Discovery Point Child Development Centers, but he hated it.
Yeah, so in late 2009, Andrea decided to get a salaried position. The wife of one of Rusty's college roommates actually introduced Andrea to a member of her book club, Hemi Newman. And Hemi's husband was a top manager in the technical computer department at GE. So Andrea was given Hemi's contact information, and she sent him her resume. So this is how it all got started with her getting a job at GE. So she was hired after her first interview with Hemi in March of 2010, and she started out with a pretty good salary of $125,000 a year with full benefits. And the week when Andrea began her new job was the same week that Rusty was fired from Discovery Point. So he's not really too disappointed about that because he didn't like it anyway.
No, he loathed that job. But still, getting fired, wouldn't it be better if you quit?
Well, it would be better, yes. But apparently they caught him off guard or something.
Yeah.
But actually, sometimes if you get fired, it's better because you get unemployment. But it doesn't seem like that would matter. They had quite a bit of money flowing in anyway.
They had spare money. Plus, Andrea, I'm pretty impressed. This is her first kind of real job, office job, and she's making $125,000 a year.
Yeah. So she had some skills.
Yeah.
Well, Rusty decided to go off on his own as an entrepreneur. That seemed to be where his passion was and what he really thought he was good at. So he was finally free to build his own company, and his dream was to build a company that he could pass on to his children, kind of like a family dynasty. So he began networking and meeting with investors to start his own company.
And meanwhile, Andrea is really enjoying her position at GE, but found out that it required more travel than she originally thought. In July 2010, her boss, Hemi Newman, left for a business trip to Colorado. He told his wife, Riella, that he was meeting with a human resources representative. Later, Riella discovered that Hemi had put the trip on a family credit card and not on the corporate card. She was shocked because they were on a strict budget with severe financial problems. So she confronts him. He admitted that he bought 2 bottles of wine at his Colorado meetings. After Rusty Sneiderman's murder, Riella would learn who the human resources rep Hemi was meeting with was.
Wasn't actually a human resources rep, it was Andrea. So back on November 18th, when Andrea pulled into the parking lot at Dunwoody Preschool, she flung open her door and tumbled out of the car dramatically as it was still rolling.
Must have been quite the picture.
Now, the detective, Jesus Maldonado, stopped her as she ran toward the crime scene tape. He asked her to calm down, and then her knees buckled, and he had to hold her up. So inside the school, a teacher ran over and hugged Andrea. Now, Andrea was frustrated because no one was telling her anything, and then she called her parents again. So her parents drove from their home, which was about 15 minutes away. Also, her brother came over, and Andrea left Ian at the school, and her parents drove her home. So they learned that Rusty was in Atlanta Medical Center and headed for the hospital. As her father drove to the hospital, Andrea made calls to her longtime friend, Shayna Citron, Rusty's father, Donald, and she also called Hemi Newman again. So to me, that's a little weird. I can see you might call your boss, but is that going to be one of the first things you're thinking about, is calling work?
Well, no. Plus, she already called him, right?
She's already called him.
To tell him that there was some kind of emergency, and she needed to attend to that.
Exactly.
So she's gone. She doesn't need to call him back.
Well, and before she left the office, I don't think we mentioned this, but she texted someone else at a meeting and told them that something had happened to her husband and she was leaving.
Yeah. So there's really no reason, professionally, for her to be calling her boss again.
No, there isn't. So Rusty, he'd been rushed to the emergency room with multiple gunshot wounds on his neck, his abdomen, and his chest. The gunman had fired at point-blank range. Rusty had burns on his face from the gunpowder. The bullets in his abdomen had torn into his intestines, causing massive internal bleeding. So within minutes, Rusty was pronounced dead. There really wasn't anything they could do for him.
No, he bled out.
The intestines are very vascular.
He lost most of his blood.
Yeah. So the day after the murder, detectives went to the Sneiderman house with a search warrant. Andrea was at the dining room table with her parents, Rusty's parents, and Rusty's brother Stephen. So Andrea was asked if anything unusual had happened recently, and she brought up 2 events that had upset Rusty. So these were a couple of weird things that had happened recently, and we'll find out that they really were significant.
They certainly were.
Right. So the first one was on October 20th.
Which is about a month before the murder.
Yep, exactly.
So Andrea's upstairs with Rusty when they heard the garage door open. Strange.
It's kind of creepy, I imagine.
They called 911 and the police came and took a report. Nothing had been stolen and there's no sign of anyone there. Police suggested that it may have been a glitch.
It could have been. I mean...
Sure.
It could have been someone whose opener worked on their door, and that can happen sometimes. But still, it kind of spooked him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's distinctly out of the ordinary.
Exactly.
Then 3 weeks later, on November 10th, Rusty thought he smelled gas as he was getting Ian ready for school. This is really creepy. He walked out to the side of the house where the meter was, and he found a man lying face down on the ground near the air conditioning unit. Rusty thought it was a homeless person sleeping there, but the man then stood up. Rusty asked him if he was okay, got no response. So he ran to the garage and drove the car into the street with Ian in his car seat and called 911.
So I think that was a pretty smart reaction.
Yeah.
To get away and call 911.
For 2 reasons. One, you've got this strange guy, but also there might have been a gas leak. Maybe the house is going to go up.
That's true. I didn't even really think about that.
So I'm thinking he did a good job there. Quick thinking.
Exactly. Now, Andrea was already at work when this happened, and Rusty later told her that the man looked Hispanic. He had a dark mustache. And the man ran across their lawn. While he's parked in the street with Ian and calling 911, the man runs across the lawn and into the woods behind their house. And as he's running, he's holding on to something at the small of his back. So Rusty thought that could very easily be a gun, which makes this even more concerning. And then he was also extra concerned because the man seemed to know the layout of their property. The way he left, if you didn't know the area, you wouldn't know that. So it seemed like someone had been stalking the house.
It sounded like he knew where to go to get into the woods.
So this made him very uneasy.
Yeah, that would make me uneasy.
Right. So after Andrea tells them about these 2 things, the police question her about Rusty's business dealings to see if there's some connection there. But Andrea's not easy. She's tough to talk to.
She is. I think she's an intelligent woman who doesn't suffer fools very nicely.
No, or suffer anyone.
Or anyone, right.
So,
I'm not meaning to call the police detectives fools.
I know. Well, she became really frustrated with them and reminded them of the Hispanic man outside the house. It really seems to me like she wanted to point them in a certain direction, and if they went on a different direction, that annoyed her. She wanted to be in control. Very controlling woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then a detective asked Andrea if anyone had expressed interest in her in the past year or so, and she said yes without hesitating. My boss.
So Hemi.
That's Hemi.
So she gave the detective a description of Hemi, and she told him that Hemi had told her he had feelings for her a while back. Now she said she made it clear to Hemi that she was not the type of individual who was going to have an affair or leave her husband for another man. That just wasn't something she'd do. So let's take a minute to talk about our sponsors. When I got my first job, I started going to the salon to color my hair. Those old boxes I used to use from the drugstore were full of nasty chemicals, and the results were unpredictable. I'd end up with red, orange, or even green hair. Let's just say I rarely got what I was shooting for. So I was excited to be able to afford to go to the salon. But the thing about the salon is, it takes me 1.5 to 2 hours, and it costs me nearly $200. Enter Madison Reed, the company that's changed the way we color our hair. It's a big life hack for me. Madison Reed delivers salon-quality, ammonia-free hair color to my door for under $25. I can feel good about the ingredients, and I can stay home. Join the thousands of women who've switched to Madison Reed, the multi-dimensional hair color that's made in Italy. It's delivered to your door and on your schedule. You can find your ideal color at madison-reed.com. Madison Reed would really like to honor our True Crime Brewery listeners with 10% off plus free shipping on your first color kit. Just use the promo code BREWERY. That's madison-reed.com and promo code BREWERY for 10% off and free shipping. So you might want to check that out. Have you been thinking about going back to college? If you are, and you're attending for the first time or going back to complete a degree, there are 3 common financial aid mistakes that most students make that you can avoid. You can discover them and Southern New Hampshire University by texting EXPERT to 554433. Founded in 1932, SNHU's mission is to make higher education accessible and affordable for everyone. They're devoted to learning, they're nonprofit, so they've made their New England campus available to the entire world by offering complete degree programs online. Now, while tuition is skyrocketing across the country, SNHU hasn't raised their online tuition in years. When you choose to get your education, you really owe it to yourself to avoid the top 3 financial aid mistakes. After I raised my children, I continued my education, and I'll tell you, I've never regretted it. So learn about SNHU, plus the top 3 financial aid mistakes and how to avoid them by texting EXPERT to 554433. That's EXPERT, EXPERT, to 554433. So after discussions with Rusty's brother, who was an attorney, the detectives searched the house and went through Rusty's financial documents. And this was interesting. They found some really interesting things.
Yeah, they found a life insurance policy for Rusty in the amount of $2 million payable to Andrea. Donald Sneiderman, the family accountant, was surprised by that amount.
It's a lot for someone in their 30s.
It seems to be, doesn't it?
Although they were pretty well off, so I don't know if it's shocking. It's a little surprising.
Well, I mean, the premium probably was pretty high, but I don't think that's the shocking thing. I think the $2 million, at least to the family, that seemed a bit excessive.
I guess it did, but I mean, he's someone who really wanted to provide a good life for his family. So he might think if anything happens to me, I want to make sure they have enough money to continue in the lifestyle they have, which is, pretty good lifestyle that they're leading. So I think you could look at it either way.
Yeah.
But Donald didn't know about it, so...
Right. I guess Rusty hadn't said anything about it.
Right. Now, Rusty's murder really sent shockwaves through the Jewish community in Atlanta. There were hundreds of remembrances written online in a guest book. Mourners were asked to send donations to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation in lieu of flowers.
You think a family member had CF? I mean, it seems not an odd charity to contribute to, but sort of to me it comes out of left field.
Yeah, I don't know where he got that. He gave to several charities, but I don't know why they chose that one.
So the day of the funeral, police searched the Sneiderman house while everyone else was at the cemetery. They were unable to find Rusty's wallet during this search. So
that was odd.
Yeah, he's missing that.
Yeah. So from about 25 feet away, a witness had seen the man who shot Rusty that morning at 8:30 a.m.
Okay, so we're back to the day of the shooting.
Yes.
Okay. It just jumped a little bit there.
Well, we are jumping.
We are.
Yes. He was taking his recycling to the curb outside the house when the silver minivan barreled down the street. It slowed down for a few seconds as he approached. The witness saw a dark-complexioned man, clean-shaven, driving toward Dunwoody Preschool. So within minutes of this witness sighting, a security camera picked up the van, following Rusty's car into the parking lot.
And we know what happens next.
Yeah, so police, they interviewed Andrea again, this time at the police station. And the focus became their relationship. They asked her if she or Rusty had been unfaithful. She said no. Then the detective asked Andrea again about her boss. Now, she said that they traveled together for business, and that he said he had feelings for her, and told her that she was a fantastic person. So Andrea told detectives that she didn't think Hemi was anything to look at for this, though. He was just a nice guy, had made that comment. She wasn't really pointing him out as someone to be suspicious of.
Right. And she's denying that there was any affair between the two of them.
Yeah, so this is really going to come back to bite her in the ass because she's really downplaying what actually happened between these two.
Yes, and there's more that happened than Andrea is reporting.
Well, yes, a lot more.
We're going to find that out.
So I guess it's more than downplaying, it's omitting and downplaying things.
So at the preschool, there's 47 cameras looking into every spot on the grounds. Footage from 2 of the cameras gave the best view of the murder scene, and these were submitted for analysis to a former detective who started his own company called Video Enhancements. He specialized in analyzing security videos. He could adjust the color, contrast, and light to hopefully get a better look at the shooter.
But these things aren't great. I mean, you've seen that show, See No Evil, and they show the video footage. It's usually bad. You think we could do better.
You would, but, I mean, you're trying to blow things up and enhance them, and you're ending up with just pixels.
That's what I'm saying. The technology just doesn't seem to be where it should be. I'm surprised the technology isn't better at this point, because there's so many cases where you see video footage, but you can't make out enough to do anything about it. Of course, this one, it did turn out to give them some helpful things.
This turned out to be very helpful.
It did.
So in this case, there's a haunting sequence of events that started about an hour before the shooting. So the van had pulled into the parking lot at 8 o'clock, then left the scene and then returned at 9.
So that in itself is suspicious.
It's like he's casing the joint or something, or maybe he got the time wrong.
Yeah,
and
could be.
Was looking for a Rusty's car, but it wasn't there.
But someone who's there for the right reasons, you wouldn't think they'd do that.
No.
Because if you're bringing your kid to daycare or whatever, you're not going to come back an hour later. You know what time to bring them.
Right.
The daycare's open, so.
Didn't happen that way.
No.
So Rusty's car drove up to the school with the van right behind him. This is at 9:10 in the morning. The murder itself happened in a camera blind spot.
So that's bad luck.
That's bad luck. In all the footage, the shooter was just a bearded, blurred figure. But the van came through quite clearly. And after visiting dealerships and looking on the Kia website, the van was identified as a 2011 Kia Sedona minivan.
So that was pretty easy. It seems like they came up with that quite easily. And I don't think that's a super common car either. There had only been 13 of these 2011 Kia Sedonas sold in Georgia and South Carolina. And the enhanced photos from the video footage showed these white stickers on the van's windshield and driver's side door. And one of the policemen recognized this as something that rental car companies used to keep track of their vehicles. So it's a rental car, which kind of makes it easier, I think.
Much easier.
Because if it's a stolen car, there's no way to really find out. So if it's a rental car, there's a way to track that. So they focused this search on car rental companies in Georgia and in the Carolinas. So then it's December when police get a list of all the rental agencies, so it's about a month out from the murder, and they notify them to hold on to their Kia Sedonas until the police come by and are able to inspect them. So it took until December 21st to find the van.
Right. The record showed that the van had been rented on November 17th and returned on the 18th, which, as you remember, was the day of the murder.
Right, yes.
The contact number was a cell phone. When the detective called this number, Hemi Newman answered. There's your aha moment, huh?
Yeah, so that's not very clever. This is a smart guy. Why did he rent a car in his own name? Leave his cell phone number? He must have known there were cameras there.
Well, he wasn't thinking clearly. I mean, that's a stupid thing to say, but...
Well, we'll find out later that he did claim to be insane, actually, didn't he?
He did.
But he did have a disguise. He went through a lot of effort in planning here. So it just seems silly to me that he rented this car with his own name and number. Now, until they found this out and called, they really hadn't considered Hemi as a serious suspect in this case. He hadn't been interviewed or investigated at all, really. Because from what Andrea had told them, Hemi had just made this fleeting romantic advance to her, and that was it. So a background check was done on Hemi, and he had no previous arrests. There were no red flags to concern anybody.
Right. I'm just thinking that maybe they could have talked to him a little bit before all this happened. I mean, he's Andrea's boss, and she said that he had a romantic interest in her.
Yeah.
That would seem to me it'd be worth checking into a little bit.
Probably.
But
he seems like a respectable married guy with,
yeah.
He doesn't seem like he would have anything to do with it if you don't know.
You don't. And she said that there was nothing between them.
Right.
So.
And they're really not suspecting her either.
Right.
Now, when Hemi answers his cell phone, the detective told him that he was investigating a hit and run involving a silver van that had been traced back to him. So why did he do that? That confuses me.
Well, the only thing I can think is that here's Hemi down in Florida. If they say they're investigating a murder, he might run.
Yeah, but wouldn't you be smart enough to know when they call you if you've committed murder that it's probably connected to that? I mean...
Well, yeah, but we've just talked about the stupid things he did in terms of renting the car in his own name and giving his cell phone number.
Right. Well, he did seem really calm, and he was cooperative. He told them he was in Florida and agreed to come and speak with police when he got back to Georgia.
January 4th, 2011, Hemi called back. Police went to his home and brought him back to the station for an interview. The interview began pleasantly, but Henry soon became nervous and complained of claustrophobia. But still, he waived his rights to remain silent or have an attorney present.
Now that surprised me. Did that surprise you?
It did. Again, we got a supposedly smart guy here.
Yeah, so why would he do that?
I mean, lawyer up.
But people do this again and again. I think people are afraid they'll look guilty if they get a lawyer. That's what I think.
Well, I'm sure that's the reason.
Right.
But geez, the stakes are too high not to.
I would think so, yes. But anyway, he waived his rights and he spoke to them, which was really stupid. Especially if you're guilty, you think you would do that.
Right.
Because, the police are going to try and trip you up. Even if you're innocent,
they are.
That can happen,
They're
right?
going to try to do that, and you're just going to screw yourself.
Yes.
So Hemi told the police that he had arrived at work at 5:30 in the morning that November 18th, and he hadn't heard anything about Rusty until Andrea called him. Now, it came out that Hemi had taken his car in for a safety recall repair on the 18th. Now, he hadn't said that initially to the police.
Well, once they knew that he got a rental, this is how he explained it. But it was really a quick fix.
Right.
And he told the people at the shop he didn't want to wait, which was odd. Most people waited, and the shop wouldn't give him a rental car because it just didn't warrant that.
It didn't.
So Hemi went out on his own to a rental car agency and rented the van. So that in and of itself is kind of suspicious.
It certainly is.
And then he tried to kind of skirt the issue, and when they asked him, what kind of van was it, he pretended not to know. He said it was either white or gray. He wasn't sure. So now he's getting kind of vague, kind of backing off, probably thinking, uh-oh, I'm getting in trouble here.
Good thinking. So then the police confronted Hemi with the video footage at the murder scene. He still did not confess. So after several hours, the detectives finally gave up. They handcuffed Hemi and took him to the county jail.
So he didn't confess, but they're still arresting him because that's enough evidence right there.
Yeah. I mean, the video of the murderer, you can't really tell who it is.
No. It's mostly just the van.
Yeah.
And the fact that he rented the van.
He rented the van that was at the murder scene.
Right.
So that's enough, huh?
Well, it's enough to get started. I mean, at this point, they start their investigation into finding out where the gun came from, motives. Now they're going to get a lot more into his relationship with Andrea and figure that all out. Because now that they have a pretty good idea it was him just from the van, they need to back it up and get evidence for trying to get a conviction on him, right?
Right. Now, meanwhile, Andrea hadn't spoken with detectives since November 24th. And this is back in January now. So she came into the station on the same day Hemi was arrested to ask if they had found her husband's killer. Police, meanwhile, had been getting a bad feeling that Andrea had withheld information from them.
Well, hold on here a second. So, is it strange to you that this is the same day? Don't you think there was some conversation going on between these two?
Well, there had to be.
Amy?
That's why I said she had no contact with him for, a month and a half.
Right, and then that
decides
day...
on that very same day to go down to the police station?
Right, so these two had remained in contact even after the funeral.
Have to think so.
Yes, absolutely they had. Police were starting to get a really bad feeling about her. They thought that she was withholding information, that she was being very vague. Plus, she's just kind of a nasty person.
She's not a likable person.
No.
That's for sure.
It doesn't help her. So when police told Andrea they had made an arrest in Rusty's murder case, she asked repeatedly if they were sure. But what was really significant is that she never asked, well, who did you arrest? Who is the suspect?
Yeah.
Isn't that odd?
Wouldn't you like to know who they think killed your husband?
Well, if they tell you they've arrested someone, isn't that one of the first things you're going to say is who?
Who did it? Right.
I think that would probably be at least in the top 5 things you're going to ask, if not the first thing you're going to ask. So that's very suspicious.
It certainly is. So Hemi's denied bail. He has no money. His wife's in the process of starting divorce proceedings. He gets a public defender. Then police confronted Andrea and conducted another interview with her. And she got very, very defensive.
Well, this is when her claws come out. She's very nasty.
Yeah. Now that they've got Hemi, it's time to desert that ship.
Now, if she and Hemi were in on this together, she threw him under the bus quickly.
Absolutely.
She did not try and save him at all.
She said he was crazy.
Yeah.
She told police he'd sent her an iTunes gift song on December 28th. Bruno Mars's Just the Way You Are.
That's, like over a month after the murder.
Yeah.
So he's still making these romantic advances toward her. So at this point in the interview, Andrea's really becoming dismissive and insulting towards Hemi.
She sure is.
She's really turning on him big time.
You talked about throwing him under the bus. That's exactly what she's doing. And it gets worse when she testifies at his trial.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she's throwing him under the bus. She's backing up the bus, going forward. She's just squishing him under the bus.
Mm-hmm.
So she says to police, who sends a song? Real snotty like that. What was he hoping, that I'd recover and fall in love with him? I told you that he had feelings for me. Did that make him crazy? I don't know. I don't understand crazy people. That's my Andrea interpretation.
That's a good voice.
It's kind of how she is, yeah.
But then she was speaking more softly, and she told police about her trips to Florida, Nevada, South Carolina, the United Kingdom. She said that Hemi expressed interest in having a relationship with her while on a trip to Lake Tahoe. Police wanted to continue questioning Andrea about emails and calls she had with Hemi. Andrea said she needed to go into the hall and talk with her mother for a moment. So she leaves the room and doesn't return.
She pulled an OJ.
Yeah, just off she goes.
Right.
She didn't speak with police again after that.
Now she's lawyered up, which she probably should have done sooner, but I feel like if you're the wife of the murder victim, getting a lawyer looks bad. There's no way around that.
Yeah.
Although in the long run, you're better off getting one, I guess.
You're way better off doing that.
So police got search warrants, and they cleared out Hemi's office drawers, and they took his computer. They got the travel records from Hemi and Andrea, including the credit card charges, the plane reservations, and all their hotel and restaurant bills. So they'd been traveling together more than once a month. A lot of traveling.
Right.
Probably spending more time with him than her husband.
Probably.
And I don't know how many of these were actually business related, because in Hemi's position, he was allowed to make these calls of when they needed to go and what the expenses could be. So he had a pretty open format to work with there. So then police spoke to some other GE employees, and they got mixed results with that.
Yeah, several of them conceded that Hemi and Andrea were close. They'd sit next to each other in meetings. They drove together to outside work events. They also ate lunch together most days. Nothing terribly wrong with that.
No, but they seem close, like at least close friends.
Right. Hemi was described as a model boss. He was calm and logical, who didn't discuss his personal life.
Yeah, so up until the Andrea thing, he seemed to be getting along pretty well at work.
Right.
You know, he had his depressive and manic episodes, but he seemed to be very logical and involved in his job and did a good job.
He seemed to be doing a good job.
Right. So on the day of the murder, though, Hemi's computer was turned on at 5:30 a.m., but he didn't use it. and with the computer on, he left the office. Now, cameras in the basement hallway showed Hemi leaving the building on November 18th at 5:51 a.m. So he'd gone into the office at 5:30, left at 5:51, so he'd only been at work for 20 minutes. Another interesting thing was the night before, he'd sent an email changing a 9 a.m. appointment on the 18th to 2:30 in the afternoon.
So then we see Hemi at a gas station at 11:06 in the morning on the day of the murder, where he used his debit card to fill the gas tank of the minivan. Then he returned the van. At 11:48, he's back at GE.
Yeah, so when he got back to GE, though, he didn't scan himself in with his key card as he normally would. He got a visitor pass, and here's what gets me is he went into the building where Andrea was working. So that makes me think that she's in on this.
Right.
Now,
of course, she's not there right then. She's at the hospital.
Right. But what was he going in there for?
Yeah.
Was he going to get something off her computer?
Possibly.
Or something he'd left
or
there?
Maybe he wanted to think that she was still there for whatever reason, wanted to talk with her.
Because she'd called him.
Well,
right?
He knew that she had left to tend to her husband.
Yes, and she knew her husband was dead. He knew her husband was dead. So why would he think she'd come back to work?
I don't know. But I think your idea of maybe there was something he needed from her office to cover his tracks.
So. Well, I wonder, when I read about that, I thought, well, she called him. She called him on her way to the daycare, and she called him when she was with her parents on the way to the hospital. What was she calling him for? Was she telling him, you need to get something out of my office? That's a possibility.
That too. Very good.
I'm getting good at this.
Yeah.
So now Hemi really doesn't have an alibi, because it's weird that he went into work at 5:30. He never does that.
No.
And why did he turn on the computer and then leave? Well, seems obvious he wanted it to look like he was at work.
Like he was there.
But not too bright.
Again, he had to have known with timed entry and cameras all over the place that they'd see that he left and returned.
Well, I think he might have thought he fooled them with using the visitor pass and going out through the basement.
Yeah.
But if he's really insane, that would explain it also.
It would.
So let's go back to Halloween Day 2010.
So we're about 3 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks before the killing.
So we're going to go back and see about where the weapon came from and stuff like that.
Good idea.
So Halloween Day 2010, so that's, what'd you say, almost 3 weeks, 3 weeks before the murder. So at 2:45 p.m., a call was made from Hemi's cell to Parnell's Firearms and Range in Woodstock, Georgia. Phone records put Hemi near a cell tower in Dalton, Georgia, about 80 miles from Dunwoody. Now this put him near the Northwest Georgia Trade and Convention Center, where the Eastman Gun Show was being held that weekend. So the gun show advertises itself as a one-stop shop for guns and ammunition. One of the convention cameras actually captured Hemi walking through the admission area. Now there was no paper trail of Hemi purchasing a gun, but that wouldn't necessarily mean anything because Georgia gun laws are very relaxed. Residents don't have to register firearms. Now there's the federal government law for background checks for people buying guns from dealers, but not in private party sales, which would include the gun show where Hemi was.
So he could walk in, slap down cash money, and get a gun, and there wouldn't be any record.
Exactly. Now at 6:30 p.m. on November 1st, so the following day, Hemi walked into Parnell's, and he signed a form saying that he had read and understood the safety rules. He purchased a target and used a target lane for 30 minutes there on the range. So Mark Potter, an investigator from the DA's office, was going through Hemi's cell records when he found an unknown name, Jan De Silva. He called this man and set up a meeting with him. Now when Potter showed De Silva a photo of Hemi, De Silva said yes, he'd sold him a gun back in October of 2010.
Right. De Silva had been contacted about his gun on gunlistings.org. The gun sold to Hemi shot .40 caliber bullets, which was the same caliber that killed Rusty. De Silva had showed Hemi how the gun worked, gave him a cleaning kit and 2 kinds of bullets. He thought that was the end of the deal, but 2 weeks later, Hemi showed up at the diner where De Silva parked cars. Hemi told him that something bad had happened with the gun and he'd had to get rid of it. Out of the blue, he told De Silva, "Don't ever have a mistress."
So this whole event makes me believe that he really did have some mental illness going on. Because why in the world would you go back to the person who sold you the gun and tell him that? I mean, he explained to the guy that he'd thrown the gun into a lake, and then he made up some story that people might try and contact him about the gun because of something that happened, but he didn't admit to shooting anyone. And he also offered him cash to not say anything when people called to check about the gun. Now, De Silva refused the cash, which makes sense.
Yes.
But don't you think this is all just very kind of unstable behavior?
It is. I mean, I can see in Hemi's kind of addled mind, he's trying to set up an alibi that, yes, he purchased the gun, but he disposed of it.
Oh, is that what you think?
Yeah.
I didn't think of it that way. Okay. I thought he was just trying to get the guy to lie for him.
Well, he is, too.
Oh,
but,
okay.
But he's trying to get someone to think, okay, it wasn't the murder weapon.
Well, sure. But I think he's trying to get this De Silva to say that he didn't even sell him the gun, though.
Possibly.
So that's the way I interpreted it.
Yeah, that could be, too.
And this "don't ever have a mistress" statement really says a lot.
Doesn't it?
Of what's on his mind.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, so investigators were able to get a fired shell casing from De Silva that had been fired from that gun. And they compared it with the casings from the murder. And of course it was a match. So now they can connect the gun to Hemi, the van to Hemi. So they're really making progress here in getting a conviction, I would think.
It's closing in on Hemi, that's for sure.
Yes, yep.
Now, Hemi keeps meticulous files for all his trips for GE. Of course he does. I mean, these are expense account things.
Yeah.
So you have to. So Andrea had told police that she traveled alone to Colorado back in July. But in fact, Hemi had been with her. They had dined at an Italian restaurant, and they shared a $50 bottle of wine.
So before Andrea showed up at the Hilton in Denver on July 18th, the phone at the front desk had rung, and clerk Ruth Ingraham answered and spoke to a man who was calling to say that his wife Andrea Sneiderman would be checking in at 7 p.m. He said they were newlyweds and that she was coming to the hotel on business. He asked the clerk to buy flowers and chocolates and a nice card to put in her room, and he said he'd be flying out during the week and would repay her. Now Ruth, she politely refused, but this man was really insistent. He called several clerks over that day, trying to get them to buy flowers and chocolates and write a message and leave it in the room for her, going on and on about how they were newlyweds and she was really going to be lonely without him. Really kind of nutty stuff. A little over the top.
Certainly is. So the message that he got to her, Andrea...
Yeah, they finally agreed to take a message.
For the sweetest and most beautiful woman in the world. Peaceful sleep knowing that you are always in my dreams. Love, Hemi.
So,
Uh-huh.
I would just say, if you're not in a relationship with him and you get this message, aren't you going to go to HR or your husband or something?
One would think.
Because...
Although we've heard her own voice saying that she thought she was able to deal with it herself.
Well, but she wasn't dealing with it.
Well, that's because there was more to it than people thought.
All right. Well, we'll get to our opinions when we finish this story, because we both have pretty strong opinions on it.
But you're right. If it's an unwanted attention, it's almost like sexual harassment.
Almost.
Okay, it is sexual harassment.
Yes, it would be. But I'm just thinking these are really not unwanted advances, obviously.
Well, no. And there's some evidence for this. 3 days after Andrea arrived, Hemi shows up. And that morning, Andrea requested to be moved to a room with 1 king bed instead of 2 queen beds. And she also said that the room would have 2 guests. So,
yeah, well...
What do you think there, huh?
Well, that really makes it look like she was having an affair with him, wouldn't you say?
Wouldn't you? Consensual.
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, it really seems that way. I just can't believe her stories. Another interesting thing is that Hemi paid his own way, so he wasn't there on business.
No.
His wife found that out soon enough.
She did.
So the police were also able to find hundreds of emails and texts between Hemi and Andrea that really looked like they were in a mutual romantic relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's hundreds. So there's something going on here, right?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is that they are romantic and leading, but none of them are really sexually explicit. So it's hard to say, aha, exactly. Although I could still say aha pretty comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Andrea had sent Hemi pictures of herself and her children. So why would you do that?
Right. You wouldn't necessarily.
Right. It's weird.
Now, even meeting Rusty didn't seem to change Hemi's desire for Andrea. That August before the murder, 2 men had lunch together, and Rusty had written to a former associate looking for a position for Hemi. So he's trying to help Hemi out?
Yes.
Because his wife asked him to.
Right.
So
Andrea introduced them.
He has no idea. I mean, it would seem to be also if his wife's having an affair, he can get rid of the guy by finding him a position elsewhere.
I don't think Rusty had any idea.
But
I mean, we don't know because Rusty didn't talk to anyone about it.
I'm probably off base there anyway.
I mean, it could be. Maybe he did see him as a bit of a threat, but I don't really see it because when you look at Hemi, he looks like just a schlump, a married schlump boss.
Yeah.
He doesn't look like someone that she's going to run off with.
No. So in the week after Hemi and Rusty met, Andrea and Hemi traveled to Greenville, South Carolina. They shared wine. They had adjoining rooms in the hotel. After they returned, Hemi sent Andrea a flowery apology saying that he just wanted to give her so much. And then just days later, he emailed her with a marriage proposal. So it seems to me something might have happened in Greenville.
Well, yes, this is when she had the whole repentant email.
Right.
That she felt guilty. And then in court, which we played in our intro to this episode, Andrea said that they had just held hands, and that's why she felt like she had deceived her husband, that was a deception. But It seems to most people who are reasonable that more than that had happened. I mean, he'd actually told the realtor more than that, hadn't he?
He certainly had.
Yeah. Well, in September of that year, Andrea had lunch with her close friend Shayna, and Andrea had told her that her boss had told her he was in love with her. She said maybe if she wasn't married, she would have been interested too. But then the next time Andrea had lunch with Shayna, she seemed really giddy about Hemi and talked about going out and dancing with him on one of their trips. And Shayna had left that lunch feeling really concerned about Andrea's marriage.
Understandably.
Seemed like she'd really checked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Around the same time, Hemi confided in Melanie White, who was his real estate agent. They'd known each other for 3 or 4 years. Melanie kept in touch a few times each year, and Hemi requested an in-person meeting with her to discuss a short sale on his home.
Yeah, because he's getting behind in the mortgage payments. He's in financial trouble.
He's in deep financial straits.
So even if you put his fascination and obsession with Andrea aside, he also, if he was with Andrea and he killed Rusty, he also would benefit financially because of the huge life insurance settlement.
Right.
So it had been suggested by some of the prosecutors that Hemi really just wanted Rusty's life. He wanted to take over because he talked about the kids, he needed the money, he was in love with Andrea, he just kind of wanted to take over the whole life was part of that. But when Hemi got together with Melanie, he did tell her that he had another woman in his life. And he said the woman was from work, she was married, and she had 2 small children. Now he refused to give her the name because Melanie probably knew her, because it was a small Jewish community they were in, or at least knew of her. So when Hemi asked for advice from Melanie, she said, I think you should go back to your wife and kids and leave this other woman alone. She's married. So these are probably wise words from Melanie to Hemi.
Pretty good advice.
Pretty good advice that he just did not take.
No, he was too far gone.
Yeah. So he met again with her a few weeks later. And this time Hemi said that he and his wife had gone to marriage counseling and it just wasn't going well. Then he told her about an upcoming business trip with the woman he'd mentioned before. And Melanie was really unhappy to hear these plans. He seemed like kind of a lovesick puppy. And he seemed all excited about being with Andrea. He seemed checked out of his marriage as well. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Melanie's not real happy with this.
No.
She thinks he's screwing himself up.
Exactly. She thinks he's being very foolish.
So, business trip.
Yeah.
This is where things really go downhill between Hemi and Andrea.
Go downhill?
Yes.
Okay.
At least the aftermath, right?
So what business trip is this
so
that
they're
we're talking about?
going to London.
Oh, the London one.
Or the United Kingdom. So they're both pretty meticulous planners. They created a spreadsheet with the places that Andrea wanted to visit while in London. They discussed going to a dance club. Now, something happened on the trip, according to the mysterious emails that followed. So Andrea writes to Hemi on September 25th, and I quote, "Honest is good, and maybe I'm not being honest enough. Not sure, but I do not want it to ruin the trip overall, and you know that. Desire versus reality, as you know, is a world I'm trying to ignore because I have to. So sorry, not fair to you, I know. I have other thoughts, but not the time right now." End of quote.
So this is very cryptic.
Uh-huh.
What do you think it means? I mean, if you're just taking a shot, knowing what you know from reading the book and doing some research, what do you think happened that made this email materialize?
Well, to me, it sounds like they were going to have sex. And she said, no, I can't do this.
Okay.
Desire versus reality.
I kind of thought that maybe they did have sex and it was more about not being together long term, although it could be either.
Breakup sex?
Well, no, like they'd not really thought about it and had like passionate, lustful sex. But then he wanted to be a couple and get married, and she was like, she couldn't do that because she didn't want to be a divorced woman.
That's a good one, too.
Plus, I feel like she didn't really have desire to have a long-term relationship with Hemi.
I don't think so.
I think she might have liked his attention and liked the thrill, but I don't think she was really interested in him for a rest of her life type plan.
Well, no. I mean, as you said, he was kind of schlumpy and unattractive.
Yeah.
Didn't manage money well.
No.
Right?
No, her husband was much better with money.
So maybe she's thinking, if I have a relationship with this guy, my $2 million inheritance is going to disappear.
And if you think she was in on the murder, that would lead you to think she wanted Hemi and the money. Or another thing could be that she saw Hemi as a way to get the money, and then she'd move on and find someone new.
I like that one.
Yeah, I do too. That might be the most likely. But the weird thing was that Hemi forwarded this email from her and some other ones to Melanie, the real estate agent who'd kind of become his confidant.
Yeah, like his therapist almost.
And she's like, she didn't want to answer the phone anymore. It's getting to be too much.
Oh, God, it's Hemi again.
Because she's the only one he can really confide to, I guess. I mean, nobody else wants to hear it. And she didn't know how to respond because he kept ignoring her advice anyway. So Hemi told a friend in Houston that he was having an affair and considering a divorce. And the friend told Hemi he should try and save his marriage also. Now, Hemi only responded with a chuckle to that. And then on October 4th, so like 6 weeks before the murder.
About 6 weeks, right?
That's when Hemi moved out of his house, separated from his wife, and got an apartment of his own.
So then in late October, we're getting to about 3 weeks before the murder.
Right, yep.
And this is after the London trip.
Yep, I think this is their last trip together before the murder.
Right. They returned to Greenville on a business meeting. They checked into their adjoining rooms and then went into the Pulse nightclub in the hotel.
So here's really the only witness we come across who actually saw them having physical contact that would be interpreted as romantic or sexual in nature.
Right. And maybe alcohol fueled a little bit, but anyway. Christine Oliveira was the bartender when they walked in. It was a slow season, so they were the only customers there. They ordered drinks, and Hemi told her how happy he was and how nice the bar was. Andrea seemed a little upset. When she went to the bathroom, Hemi said to Christine that Andrea was dealing with a real jerk at home.
So do you think that's something Andrea was telling him, or is that you think that was his own interpretation of Rusty?
Oh, I'm pretty sure that's his interpretation.
She may have been feeding it to him.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Hemi and Andrea went out to the dance floor, and Andrea danced the salsa for him. We forgot to mention that she was quite an accomplished dancer.
Yeah, she was.
She was in contests and stuff.
Yeah, she was a good dancer. So she was actually kind of putting on a show for him.
Right. And the salsa is a nice Latin kind of sexy dance.
Oh, it must have made him wild.
Yeah.
Because he was already very smitten with her, so.
At one point, he pulled her toward him and then began groping each other. This is according to the bartender, Christine.
Right.
He had his hands on her posterior, or can I say ass?
Whatever you want to say, I'm okay with. I checked the explicit button on the episode.
Okay. Hemi had his hands on Andrea's ass, and she was hugging him. They kissed 3 times on the lips.
Yes, I guess these weren't like make-out kisses. They
No.
were like pecks.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, come on. It seems to me it's definitely not normal boss worker type stuff.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, that goes beyond friendship, for sure.
It does.
So while in Greenville, Hemi called Melanie again and told her about the dinner and the dancing, so he can barely contain himself.
Poor Melanie.
Now here's the part where I think they must have had sex, because he ended his conversation, according to Melanie, by saying that he and Andrea went into the same hotel room and that Andrea had given in. So how else would you interpret that?
No other way.
I agree. So if they hadn't had sex in the previous trip to the UK, I think they definitely had sex on this trip to Greenville.
Or what about the trip to Colorado or Tahoe?
Well, there's all those.
I mean, they had a single room with a king bed.
I know, it just makes me wonder when he said she gave in, that
Yeah.
maybe they didn't actually have sex.
This certainly makes it sound like he finally had sex with her.
Yeah, maybe they were cuddling and making out and all these things, which are definitely not okay.
No.
Right? So it doesn't really matter if they had sex or not, really.
Right.
But it seems like they definitely did at that point. I mean, some of the calls between Hemi and Andrea raised a lot of questions for the investigators as well.
On October 15th, which is 2 weeks after Hemi had split with his wife, he made 12 calls and texts that pinged a tower near Marietta and a business called Wild West Gun Traders. And there was one 16-minute call to Andrea.
So that's very suspicious. If he's out at a gun shop, why is he calling and talking to Andrea for 16 minutes? If she doesn't know anything about it.
Right. It's work-related.
Well, it's very suspicious.
2 weeks after that, which was the day that Hemi was in Dalton for the gun show, which was October 31st, he sent a text to Andrea's phone. The contents couldn't be retrieved.
Now that's a shame, because I'd really like to know what
Wouldn't
these
you?
texts said.
Less than 2 hours after that, he called Parnell's Firearms and Range, where he went the next day to practice shooting. Then on another day, this is still, I guess, in October, maybe early November, he called 2 costume stores in between calls to Andrea.
Yes. So I just wonder about that. I mean, he's very meticulous in planning this. He's actually going and practicing shooting, but he signs in and uses his own name again.
Duh.
So November 18th, so this is the day of the murder. And less than 30 minutes after Rusty was shot, Hemi made several calls. So let's go over these a little bit.
Okay.
So between 9:27 and 10:50 a.m., the 15 calls he made pinged a tower far away from his GE office. There were 9 to Andrea. 9. Let's think about that for a minute.
Right.
Why did he call her 9 times? Now, they went unanswered until 10:30 a.m. when a call between Hemi and Andrea lasted 42 seconds. Just long enough to say, I did it?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe?
Something like that.
Something like that, because 42 seconds isn't very long. Seems like you're just trying to get a message through.
Right.
And if it was just him being crazy, wouldn't she have told police when she talked to them, you know, he called me a couple hours after the murder and told me this or that, but she didn't. She didn't mention it at all.
Nope.
So that looks bad for her. Now, around that same time, Andrea spoke to Rusty's father, and she texted her co-worker, Alan Shackley, telling them that Rusty had been shot. So this is a big thing, because no one had told her that, right?
Right.
So after reviewing Andrea's statements to police, she had said that at that time no one had told her what had happened to Rusty. So had Andrea known what Hemi was planning and just assumed, or had Hemi told her what he did?
Both.
Both. It seems like it has to be at least one or the other.
Right. But I think she knew what he was planning.
Yes.
And then that 40-second phone call of the 9 that were to Andrea on the day of the murder, he told her they'd done it.
Yeah, so late 2010, early 2011, this is all really coming together.
It is.
They're putting the case together pretty concretely, at least against Hemi.
March 2011, so what are we, 4 months after?
Yep.
The media released information about investigators having suspicions of Andrea.
So this is when all hell broke loose with the media.
Here we go.
And she was some pissed.
Yep. Andrea's attorney told reporters that Andrea was cooperating fully with the DA's office.
Yeah, so at the preliminary hearing, the judge refused to dismiss the search warrants and refused to exclude Hemi's statements to police from both before and after his Miranda warning. So all of the evidence put together against Hemi was allowed to be used in his trial.
Right. And then additionally, the search warrants were released to the media for every potential juror to hear or read about. And information on the van rental, the gun purchase, and the phone records were revealed to the public. Details of emails, including the iTunes gift of the Bruno Mars love song, also reached the media.
So is this normal for this kind of stuff to get out to the public before the trial?
Wouldn't think so.
Me either. I found this strange.
It's kind of prejudicial, don't you think?
Well, yeah, because you still have everybody out there. You need to pick a jury.
Yep.
So Hemi's attorneys held a news conference, and attorney Doug Peters told reporters Mr. Newman had a mental illness. Because of that mental illness, at the time of the shooting, he was just unable to understand the difference between right and wrong. So now we know where they're going with that.
We're going to go for the insanity plea.
So if you're a cynic and you're a skeptic about him having a mental illness that affected his ability to tell right from wrong, you're going to say, well, they saw that the evidence was just so overwhelming. This was the only way they could go to try and save his ass.
Right.
Right?
Or you could be charitable and say he's really mentally ill.
Well, yes, it could be either way. That's what I'm saying. If you were skeptical, you'd say that.
Yes.
Now, the attorney was referring to the McNaughton rules on criminal responsibility, and I know you've looked into that for us, so I'm going to let you talk about that for a couple minutes.
So the McNaughton rule stems from the 1840s in Great Britain.
I love it when we get a little history lesson.
So here's your history lesson.
I love it.
So the rule was formulated as a reaction to the acquittal of one Daniel McNaughton on the charge of murdering Edward Drummond. This was a person whom McNaughton had mistaken for the British Prime Minister Robert Peel. So the law states, and I'm going to quote again, every man is presumed to be sane, and that to establish a defense on the grounds of insanity, it must be clearly proved that, at the time of the committing of the act, the party accused was laboring under such a defect of reason, from disease of the mind, as to not know the nature and quality of the act he was doing, or if he did know it, that he did not know he was doing what was wrong.
Okay, now
End of quote.
Now this is something that rarely works as a defense, right?
It rarely works.
Now this was, he thought he was killing the Prime Minister, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
But he killed some innocent guy?
Right.
Not that the Prime Minister wasn't innocent, but he killed he was mistaken identity.
He had a mistaken identity.
Now why was he going to kill the Prime Minister? Because of some delusions?
Because of some delusions.
Okay.
So these rules that were formulated have been a standard test for criminal liability in relation to mentally disordered defendants in common law jurisdictions for quite some time. So when the rules are satisfied, the accused may be judged not guilty by reason of insanity or guilty but insane. The sentence may be a mandatory or discretionary period of treatment in a secure hospital facility.
Okay.
So that's what it stipulates.
And this is a federal law?
This is a state-by-state law. Most every state in the United States has this law.
But different versions.
Minimally different versions. But there are some states that don't recognize it at all. Georgia does, obviously, because that's
what they're doing. Exactly, yeah. Okay. So it's been around a long time.
It's been around for almost 200 years.
So I imagine it's been modified in that time.
Yeah.
At least somewhat.
Right.
Okay, well, Andrea had an attorney, of course, and his name was Seth Kirschenbaum. And he released a statement after Hemi's attorneys had released their statement about his having a mental illness. And he said, "We are relieved that Mr. Newman has admitted that he killed Rusty Sneiderman. This is a cold-blooded, premeditated murder. Hopefully the prosecution is prepared to rebut his insanity defense."
Right. Now, this surprised the district attorney because nothing in the investigation to this point had pointed to mental illness.
No, it wasn't
So
like
there's-
an overriding factor, was it?
No.
It wasn't something that was coming up.
This is kind of out of the blue.
Seems like
that
it to
we're
him.
going to plead the insanity.
Although he does have this history of manic depressive, but that's not insanity.
Right. And witnesses had used words like calm, methodical, and organized to describe Hemi. After the murder, he acted as he always did. So if anything, people described Hemi as boring and predictable. Prosecution went to the judge and asked for documentation relevant to Hemi's claim of insanity. The defense said that Hemi didn't have to provide the documentation because it would infringe on his right against self-incrimination. So the judge disagreed on this and opened Hemi's case file to prosecutors.
Yeah, so now after speaking with Hemi for several hours while he was in the jail, a psychiatrist brought in by the defense found some symptoms of a psychotic disorder and also the possibility that he had been having obsessive thoughts. He had erotomanic delusions of Andrea. Now, what does that mean? That means that he's delusionally thinking that they're in a relationship when they're not?
Right.
Okay.
In the manic phase.
Right.
Erotomanic.
There was a great book about that. I think it was by Ian McEwan, and there was actually a British movie on it with starring Daniel Craig. The name of it, I believe, was Enduring Love. Anyway, it was an interesting thing that actually people can believe they're in a relationship with someone famous or someone that they have a crush on.
Yeah.
So that's what they're saying is going on with him. Although it isn't really certain here, he may have been having a sexual relationship with her or he may not have. But a lot of the communication between the two would lead you to think that it's more than just a delusion. There is more to this relationship, for sure.
I get the impression, yeah.
I mean, she's at least leading him on and pushing him away and kind of toying with him, it seems to me.
At points, Hemi would say that they had sex, and then other times he would say he didn't know if it had really happened.
So maybe he was saying that to protect her, though. That's another thing I've considered, is he may have been so crazy about her, he was protecting her.
Possibly.
Well, when the psychiatrist asked for assistance with Hemi, she recruited Dr. Peter Thomas. Now, he met with Hemi and noted psychotic behaviors as well.
Right. Hemi told Dr. Thomas that he had experienced demons embracing him and asking him to come with them. So now we're starting to get into some more of an unhinged mind. He'd considered suicide but changed his mind because of his children. After Hemi met Andrea, he said that a spectral vision appeared as a sort of angel. And the angel told him that Andrea's children, Sophia and Ian, were his children. So we've got these demons on the one hand that are trying to entice him, and then this angel who's appearing in a shaft of light. I'm embellishing a little.
Well, it's like your typical cartoon, devil on one shoulder, angel on the other.
Right.
It seems like it could be made up. It's just so obvious, but we don't know. I mean, the professionals seem to maybe believe it. Hemi described a relationship with Andrea that brought him both sorrow and joy. And when he shared a hotel bed with her, he said it was the most incredible time of his life. Now, the next time Hemi said he saw the angel told him that the children were at risk from Rusty, so he needed to protect Ian and Sophia from their own father. Now, I don't know if this is something he would make up or if this is something he really felt. I mean, I guess nobody does, but it seems like an awfully convenient thing to say I was protecting the children.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe, to be honest with you.
So communications with Andrea became more frequent and more intense, and Hemi began making plans to kill Rusty Sneiderman. His first attempt was on November 10th. The homeless man lurking around the gas meter was Hemi in disguise, waiting to shoot Rusty. But Rusty called 911 and Hemi fled. 8 days later, he rented the Kia and shot Rusty to death.
Yes, on Tuesday, February 21st, 2002, opening statements in the case of Georgia versus Hemi Newman began. Now, Rusty's family had become convinced that Andrea was involved, and they had all turned against her. They were not on her side.
No, I mean, all the stuff that has been leaked to the media has been published.
Yes.
She sure doesn't come out very well.
She doesn't. I mean, you would think she did have an affair, and she may have had something to do with the murder from what you've read or what you hear about it. Now, Andrea was the state's first witness, though. She came out with that grim expression, and she really didn't come across well on the stand, did she?
Not in the least.
Really, I hated her.
Can't even begin to say that you feel charitable towards her.
No, she seemed more annoyed than anything.
Yeah. Like, why are you wasting my time?
Exactly.
She gave short one-word answers.
Yep.
Nope.
Yeah, and she definitely downplayed her relationship with Hemi. When asked why she hadn't told Rusty or Human Resources at GE about Hemi's romantic interest in her, that's when she claimed that she thought she could handle it on her own. But then they did confront her with her emails, with the shared bottles of wine, frequent texts and calls by the defense. The defense confronted her with that. And this is when she became really angry and really defensive with them, kind of, mouthing off, being nasty.
Yep. She wasn't a very good witness.
No.
So, for most of the full afternoon, she replied with terse yeps and nopes and treated each email as a dim memory that meant nothing to her.
She did, and she claimed that Hemi's marriage proposal that he'd written to her was just ridiculous, and she didn't even take it seriously.
Right. She denied kissing Henry on the dance floor at the Pulse nightclub. She claimed not to remember any of the texts or calls from Hemi during the times when he was at the gun show or at the firing range.
And if this was one call, one text, you might let it go, but there's so many. It just is such a pile of things that they can't all be coincidence.
Can't be.
So after the prosecution had laid out its evidence about the murder weapon, the FBI electronics examiner testified about the secrets that they found in Hemi's iPhone. These were very revealing.
Certainly were. So they were able to show which cell phone towers pinged each call and could be able to draw a map for the jury. So Hemi had texted Andrea from the gun show and called her in between 2 costume shop visits.
So this has to be more than a coincidence.
So it would seem.
It would seem, but it isn't enough to get her up for murder, really. Now, from May 2010, when Andrea started working at GE, to the day of Rusty's murder, she made 1,426 phone contacts with Hemi, and only 882 with Rusty. So that says a lot. Those numbers tell a story to me.
Yes.
And it's almost double. And Rusty's the one she'd have to communicate about groceries and kids and day-to-day things. So, to me, that's pretty overwhelming. I guess you could put a lot of those, say they're business contacts, things about work.
Yeah, but 1,400, and this is like in 6 months, right?
Yeah, from May to November.
So, it's over 200 a month.
Yeah, a lot.
To your boss.
Right.
Uh-huh.
I'd like to see how many he had with other employees.
Good
Make
point.
a comparison.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
So Hemi had described the demon's voice as similar to Barry White's, and the angel's to Olivia Newton-John.
So you can imagine the media had a great time with that.
No kidding. And I can see why the defense tried to keep them out of the trial.
Yeah. Now, he didn't actually say it was Barry White's voice. He just compared them.
Sounded like.
Yeah. Well, Hemi declined to testify in his own defense, so that's no surprise, especially if he's mentally ill. Psychiatrists testified for both prosecution and the defense. The jury had a verdict on March 15th of 2012, and they only had 2 days of deliberations. So Hemi was found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but mentally ill. So I guess if they're found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but mentally ill, it's up to the judge where they go.
Yeah, because I was going to say, according to the McNaughton rules, you're supposed to be in a hospital facility where you can be treated.
Right.
But he wasn't.
No, but I bet prisons have things that they label as treatment.
Yeah.
Right? I'm sure they do.
Treatment with air quotation marks.
Yeah, right. I'm sure they have something.
I'm sure they do.
So Hemi received a sentence of life with no possibility of parole and went to prison.
Right. Then they turned their attention to Andrea.
Yes, and Rusty's family really wanted her to go to trial for murder.
They did. I mean, they filed a wrongful death suit against her.
They did.
In civil court. And now she's been charged. Initially, she was charged with murder.
Yep, and days before her trial, a judge dismissed the charge after the district attorney said he lacked the evidence to win a conviction. So instead, she was just tried on these perjury-related charges, but several of them. And during her trial, prosecutors said she lied to police and to a jury about a romantic relationship between her and Hemi. So she was found guilty in August of 2013 on 9 of the 13 charges. And those included hindering the apprehension of a criminal, concealment of material facts, perjury, and false statement.
So she gets sentenced to serve concurrent sentences of 5 years. So that just means she might have had 9 convictions, but
Right.
she's going to serve 5 years.
I know. So she really got off easy.
And then she got time served and I think some good behavior.
Yeah, minus a year. So she was already paroled in June 2014. So just like less than 2 years.
Well, less than a year from conviction.
Yes, exactly. And less than 2 years in prison, I believe.
Yeah. She'd serve time for a year.
Now, what happened with the civil suit?
They settled. We don't know the details.
Okay, because she had gotten the $2 million.
Right.
So she was a wealthy woman.
She is.
Yes. So on June 15th of 2015, citing a violation of attorney-client privilege, Georgia's Supreme Court reversed Hemi's conviction.
So something went on there.
Yeah, there was some things that were released by the attorney that shouldn't have been. So in 2016, in August, the verdict was announced in a retrial, and he was found guilty again of murder and possession of a firearm. So nothing changed. He's still serving life.
Nothing changed for him.
No. Thought he had some hope there for a while, but nothing had changed.
Yeah.
So I think she got away with murder, with conspiring to murder.
I think she did. I mean, if she's the innocent party in this, she should have gone to her husband or to HR and reported what was going on.
Well, or even after the murder, she should have said something to police about what Hemi was doing.
Yeah, which she didn't.
No.
And I think there's enough evidence that there was some involvement between the two of them.
Well, another interesting thing is by the time they got to Hemi's murder trial, she already had a new guy hanging out with her at home. So she'd already moved on.
Right, I've forgotten that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which probably made Rusty's parents even more happy.
Oh, I'm sure they were just pissed off. Because they liked her.
Initially.
And Rusty was a great guy, from all accounts.
Right.
So it's just horrible. I mean, even if she didn't plan the murder, which I think she probably did, at least I think she probably egged on Hemi to get what she wanted.
Yeah, now, to me, I guess I can see that she wanted the $2 million and whatever other money they had saved. But
it had to be more than that, though.
There had to be something else.
She had to be unhappy with him and wanted to get rid of him.
Yeah.
Seems like it. Well,
but I think we're both in agreement that she was complicit and she encouraged Hemi to do what he did.
I think so. I mean, I'm really not sure of what degree, but I do feel like she definitely played a part in the murder happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'd like to give our thanks to Michael Freeman for his book on this case, Crazy for You. His research was invaluable to us in producing this episode of True Crime Brewery. Okay, so before we get to feedback, I'd like to do just a little bit of our shameless self-promotion.
Shameless self-promotion.
Shameless self-promotion.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so just an update quickly about what's going on at Tie Grabber this month. We just released our latest in our members-only episodes, which is part 2 in our 4-part series on the murders of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown. Part 3 is coming soon, and part 3 is going to be all about the trial, which should be really fun, because we're going to talk about, did the prosecution team fuck up? Did Marcia Clark and Chris Darden do it? Was Mark Furman really a racist? We're going to talk about that and so much more.
I think the answer to those 3 questions is yes, yes, and yes.
It's going to be like a big dish session, Dick.
Yep.
You're going to love it. So our members-only feed has been accumulating a nice bunch of podcasts now. So if you've been waiting to get more instant gratification for your money, it might be about time to sign up. In the feed, we have episodes on Sylvia Likens, Robert Kissel, Bart Whitaker, Baby Bella Bond, and Diane Downs, plus our series on the murders in Brentwood, of course. You can get these members-only episodes by just going to our website, tiegrabber.com, and joining Team Tie Grabber for $2, $3, or $5 a month. Everybody gets a gift, a cute and catchy sticker for our $2 members, a credit card-sized bottle opener for our $3 members, and a snifter, Dick's beer drinking glass of choice, right?
My choice.
For our $5 members. We love all our members equally, I must say. You get the same members-only episodes at the same time, whether you spend $2, $3, or $5. The levels are simply there so everyone can spend what is affordable for them. If you haven't heard about our new podcast, also called Watching ID, first of all, where the fuck have you been? And you really should check it out. We've been having a great time watching shows on Investigation Discovery, and now we're podcasting our discussions on the new ID show, Gone. It airs on Monday nights on Investigation Discovery, and our second episode of Watching ID will be coming out this Thursday. Last week's episode was on the disappearance of 17-year-old Chris Daigle, and Dick was a bit critical of the police work, weren't you?
I was. It was rather shoddy, in my opinion.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think I was pretty complimentary on the cinematography and the emotional gut punches that it offered. Now, as always, however you support us, you are very appreciated. If you're feeling very kind and have a few spare minutes, we always love to get reviews on iTunes. To stay up to date on all things Tie Grabber, please follow us on Twitter at Tie Grabber Pods, on Instagram, or on Facebook. I'm pretty good about letting everyone know what's coming up through social media. Also, we're always happy to get feedback and share it during our feedback segment. Let us know what you think of us, what case you'd like to hear us cover, and what theories you have on recently covered cases. You can also chat about those on our Facebook True Crime Brewery fan discussion page. Lots of really interesting talk going on there. So that's all I have to say. Do you have anything to add?
I got nothing more to say.
Okay, so let's have a little music and get to feedback. Welcome to Feedback. So, Dick, I'm going to let you go first this time because I think I went first last time.
My turn. Okay, first one is from Amethyst Eyes on YouTube regarding Gone Baby and psychics. No cases have been solved by a psychic, and detectives never use them. I agree.
Okay. Well, it seems like sometimes they use them, though.
Well,
maybe they don't pay them, but they let them
I don't
try.
think they use them. I think they investigate what the psychic has seen or claims to have seen.
Okay.
But they're not using them. And Amethyst Eyes goes on to say there is a Law & Order SVU episode called Pure that had Martin Short in it, where he played a very accurate psychic because it turned out to be his own crimes. So that's pretty good.
That's what I said.
Yeah. So that's from Amethyst Eyes. Thank you.
Okay.
We agree with psychics.
We agree with her on the psychic issue?
We do.
Okay.
Well, I do.
I do, yes.
Okay.
So I have one from Phoebe on YouTube about Gone Baby, the disappearance of Lisa Irwin, same episode. So one of two things. I think Mom would never hurt her baby on purpose, so an accidental death is very real, with her drunk sleeping with her kids. I hate for it to be that. Dad helped explaining why they stayed together, but that also speaks to why it would only be accidental. I think you have to be very stable to maintain the relationship through a tragedy like that. Most families fall apart. He may have even helped. That's a thought. Bad dude or dudette saw the girls drinking, decided to take the hurt baby, and the baby cried. They shushed her and killed her and then freaked out in the house, leaving the baby where the cadaver dogs picked up. Taking the phones, maybe dumping them with that guy, then decided they needed to get rid of the body when they saw her still drinking in the front with the neighbor. He or she went in and swept the baby away. I really hope it was the second scenario. The stolen phones make the second scenario more likely. A fire, too. I must have missed that part. Yeah, that was someone in the house to either take the baby or steal the phones and accidentally killed the baby. The cadaver dogs are most likely correct. So, yeah, Phoebe, I think that you are going through the most likely scenarios, and I hope she was just taken away also. But I do trust the cadaver dogs for the most part.
Me too.
Yep.
I got another one from M.H. Gomes on YouTube, who wants to know if this is the same show, Gone Baby.
Okay.
Wants to know if the voicemail system on the phone required a PIN number or code to check. If so, that would be more likely to indicate that Deborah or someone else who knew her well was checking the messages.
That's a good point. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, it is a good point. Lots of people do use the last 4 digits of the phone number, so it would be easy to guess. So that's, maybe not as good.
Yeah, well, that means someone could have guessed it, but it still would be more likely to be the person who knew it, I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. Then, by the way, I agree mostly with Jill on the talk show circuit. It does seem kind of sleazy, but I think sometimes it's necessary to get the info out to a great number of people, especially in cases where the victim or perp could be anywhere.
Well, yeah, the overwhelming opinion on this is that I was correct. That you need to get the word out no matter where you go.
And I was in error.
Yes.
But I'll discuss that.
Okay.
But to Dick's point, there are definitely parents or guardians that use it for personal attention, such as the Erica Parsons case.
Sure, but who cares? Let them do that. I mean, I don't care about that.
Right.
What we care about are the people that can use it positively.
Yeah.
Okay, so did you want to talk about it now or later? What you thought? I have another person who mentioned it if you want to wait till after that.
Sure.
Okay, so this is Bridget on YouTube. She says it was a great episode. You're in a horrible mood today, Dick. If my child was missing, I'd contact any resource possible to publicize the event. The faster and wider the audience, the better chance in finding your child, period, all capitals. Maybe you're just trying to point out the guilty parents that have Munchausen by proxy and have done the crime themselves. But even that can help solve the case, you know? Important. As for Amber Alert, to have an Amber Alert, there has to be a witness of a vehicle or a witness in the person suspected. I know this is horrible, but hopefully they'll change the rules in the future. There's a site you can look up yourself with the Criterion Amber Alert procedures. I don't like that rule about the witness of the vehicle, but as of now, that's the way it is.
Okay.
Okay, so Bridget agrees, and she also explained the Amber Alert for us, so that was nice.
Yeah, it's good to learn something about that.
Yeah. So, do you want to respond?
Okay. Not necessarily about me being cranky that day.
No, everybody's cranky. That's okay.
But what I was trying to get at, and I first would say that I would stand corrected in terms of getting the word out to as many people as possible. I definitely misspoke about that.
So you think it's a valid thing to do for that reason?
For that reason.
Okay.
Now, having said that, and I'm not going to try to put my foot in my mouth anymore, but to me, most of these national talk shows or news shows are just cynical whores that want to get ratings. So the more they can portray the grieving parents or guardians, the more it helps them. And I think that's probably what I was disgruntled about. Not so much trying to pass along information or get information out, but just the cynicism of the shows that are airing them.
Well, I think I share in your cynicism on the shows, but I still think it's a necessary evil.
Yeah.
That's my thought. I think that's what most of our listeners thought.
I'm retracting my statement.
Good boy.
Okay.
All right. What's the next one? I know you have one more, right?
One more, and it also has to do with the disappearance of the little girl, Lisa. This is Heavy Metal Maiden on YouTube. Dick, does your disagreement to national television have anything to do with how Ronald Cummings and Misty Crossland acted? I don't think everyone would do that, but I think the exposure could be very helpful. So,
okay,
yeah,
so
Ronald and Misty were total jerks.
So this is the Haley Cummings, the missing little girl.
Right.
I think she was 5.
She was a 5-year-old.
We haven't done an episode on it, although I think we have one planned in September.
Okay.
Okay. So, we're not that familiar with it.
No, but we know how the parents came across on TV.
Yeah.
So, but Heavy Metal Maiden thinks that exposure could be very helpful, and I'm agreeing with her, and you agree with her.
I agree, too.
So,
I mean, I think that there are people like Haley's father who are very distasteful. But like I said, so what? Let them do whatever they're doing. It shouldn't preclude someone going for the right reasons to help find and get the information out.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. That's all. I'm not trying to rub it in. I'm just trying to clarify our points.
Salt in my wounds. No.
Okay.
They were self-inflicted anyway.
So one last thing, I have an email from Alana. And she says some nice things about us, and then she gets into some cases. So she says, I think for many cases that the perpetrators may function well in their work. And in parentheses, she says Coleman, which is Chris Coleman, the guy who killed his 2 sons and his wife. He worked for the Joyce Meyers.
Yeah.
Duke, which is Bob Duke.
Yeah, that's the guy who pushed his wife and kid off the cliff.
And OJ, we all know who that is. But seem to have stalled at age 10 to 12 in their emotional, psychological growth. I totally agree. Betty Broderick also, she says, I don't think her having an outside interest, work, etc. would have helped. Have met some professional women, very skilled in their work, yet very immature in their relationships with men. Now, I might even throw in that this Andrea would fit into that. Very immature with her relationships, even though she was a smart businesswoman.
In this very case we just completed.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So she says, lives out of balance. Have you studied the Eastburn case? I haven't. So she says it's the rape and brutal murder of a mother and her 2 daughters, aged 3 and 5. How horrible is that? The culprit went to death row for the first trial and then was acquitted in the second trial. And then 20 years later, the DNA proved that he did it. But double jeopardy applied.
That's right. So he stays acquitted.
Yep. And then also, Alana makes this great suggestion, which I don't know exactly how we do it, but I think it's worth all of us thinking about. She said, in the future, would you be able to have an interactive podcast? Perhaps a contest to select 3 to 5 participants who would all study the case, and then you would present it.
Now, that's an intriguing idea.
Isn't it? It would take some planning.
I'm sure you could figure out how to do that.
Yeah. And plus, we'd get people to do our research for us on an episode.
Right.
And we could have like a contest. I don't know what kind of contest we'd have. We'd have to think about that.
We could have a contest for whoever sends me the best beer.
Oh, that has some self-interest in it.
Could.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to do anything that people would have to spend money on. That would
No,
that wouldn't be fair.
I'm being facetious.
Well, we'll think about it, though.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Alana brought up some great things.
Yeah, that case sounds interesting.
Yeah, doesn't it?
Because you always hear about cases where DNA exonerates the person from the crime. And here we have the opposite.
I know, right? Really scary.
Yeah. So that'd be something I think be worth looking into.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting. So that's all I have for today.
Me too.
Okay. So this is it. We'll say goodbye.
Goodbye till next time.
We'll see you at the quiet end.